That's kind of me being sarcastic. The author's archaic understanding of the limits of how technology, of how much technology could do to reduce the need for labor, if not get rid of it entirely, is clear. He does go on to point out some of the more absurd practices that were put in place to protect jobs by labor unions. Although in many cases these demands were completely unreasonable, it is a natural reaction in society where unless you have a job, you are completely incapable of taking care of yourself. The failings of the capitalist system become more and more clear the more you read. Now, that's essentially me, commenting. What the guy was talking about in the book at that point was, the various things that labor unions do, like they were insisting that, if you're going to have a truck driver come in from out of state, then the unions would insist that a local driver take the truck from them or also be involved in the trip, or just silly stuff like that. And, you get why. I mean, it's like these people want to be sure they're working. But a better solution to that was, rather than patching it up with Band-Aids, or in many cases what amounts to a full frontal lobotomy, they should have just gotten out of the scarcity system in the first place. Now, I'm going to go back to their book. One might pile up mountains of figures to show how wrong were the technophobes of the past, but it would do no good unless we understood clearly why they were wrong. For statistics and history are useless in economics unless accompanied by a basic deductive understanding of the facts. Which means, in this case, an understanding of why the past consequences of the introduction of machinery and other labor-saving devices had to occur. Otherwise, the technophobes will assert, as they do in fact assert when you point out to them that the prophecies of their predecessors turn out to be absurd, that may have been all well in the past, but today's conditions are fundamentally different, and now we simply cannot afford to develop any more labor-saving machinery. Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, indeed, in a syndicated newspaper column of September 19, 1945, wrote, "We have reached a point today where the labor-saving devices are good only when they do not throw the worker out of his job." So they, I guess, claim that, it's ridiculous for them to, ever assume that, technology will eliminate labor. And, after all, 40 years or so, everything will be fine. Man, I really hope I don't have to wait for 40 years for this economic slump to end, or I'm definitely going to end up without my kids and, homeless. But, oh well, that's not the big corporation's problem, is it? Now, I'm going to go into my words again. The example that the author gives to prove that the assertions of technophobes of the past were absurd comes a bit later, and I will get to it. What I wanted to point out, however, was that the technophobes were not wrong in their predictions. They just saw the problems as being a lot closer than it was. The author goes on to erect a straw man to try and discredit them by making the absurd insinuation that people would go so far as to say that in the interest of saving jobs, that trains should be abolished in favor of having men carry goods on their backs. Finally, after the typical ridicule employed by most Austrian economists who wish to distract from the failures in their logic, kind of like the people in the video, we finally get to the analogy that is supposed to solve all of this. Okay, drum roll please, guys. This is the thing that's going to make it so that technology doesn't, get rid of jobs. It'll all be okay, as long as we do this. All right, so I'm going to get here. Theories as false as this are never held with logical consistency, but they do great harm because they are held at all. Let us, therefore, try to see exactly what happens when technical improvements in labor-saving machinery are introduced. The details will vary in each instance, depending upon the particular conditions that prevail in a given industry or period. But we shall assume an example that involves the main possibilities. Suppose a clothing manufacturer learns of a machine that will make men's and women's overcoats for half as much labor as previously. He installs the machines and drops half of his labor force. This looks at first glance like a clear loss of employment, probably because it is. But the machine itself required labor to make it. So here, as one offset, are jobs that would not otherwise have existed. So basically the concept is that because it requires labor to make machines that that eliminate labor, all the jobs that are lost because of the fact that you have essentially eliminated labor will be replaced by the jobs that are making the machines that eliminate the labor. I'll go back to my words in my post. So here we have it. Apparently, any loss of jobs caused by automation will be fixed by jobs created by the need to manufacture the machines that do the automation. So in this instance, we are talking about sewing machines that are replacing workers in the clothing factory. The author suggests that the labor needed to create the machines will create jobs that will replace any jobs that are lost, and in fact probably create more jobs than were there in the first place, is what he usually asserts. This logic depends entirely on the idea that whomever is making money making these machines is not also using automated technology to create the machines in the first place. The entire motive behind using machines is to raise your profits by not having to pay wages at all, and to raise efficiency because machines don't take days off, get sick, have unions, or ask for a cut of the profits that were made by their work. Machines are quite content to just be maintained. We had a name for human workers who were forced to be content with that. We called them slaves. This becomes an issue later in our modern circumstances, and I will get to it shortly. Remember that in our era, machines make machines. Ask the unemployed auto workers in my home state of Michigan about this. Implying that technology does not create unemployment because it does in a monetary system. If what you're saying is true, don't you think that all businesses out there would be doing it to cut down costs? They are doing it to cut down costs. Can you explain that all monetary systems create aberrant behavior because money creates scarcity? That is very much wishful thinking, LOL. Yes, all businesses are doing it to cut down costs. That's kind of the point. It's happening all over the place. They're either automating or they're outsourcing. Okay. Back to reading their book. At this point, it may seem labor has suffered a net loss of employment while it is only the manufacturer, the capitalist, who has gained. But it is precisely out of these extra profits that the subsequent social gains must come. The manufacturer must use these extra profits in at least one of three ways. This is meaning the profits gained by eliminating jobs. And possibly he will use part of them in all three. 1. He will use the extra profits to expand his operations by buying more machines to make more coats. Or 2, he will invest the extra profits in some other industry. Or 3, he will spend the extra profits on increasing his own consumption. Whichever of these three courses he takes, he will increase employment. Okay, option 1 is the most likely. However, in addition, he will also likely put money into research and development into ways to minimize the workforce he must employ even further and to automate his business even further. Okay, with option 2, it does not create new jobs either in our modern society where most companies will also be doing what I suggested in option 1. Investing in another industry is not going to create jobs if all industries have decided that they're going to eliminate the workforce as much as possible. Option 3's effect on employment in a world of automation is actually minimal at best in our modern times. The fact that the guy's going out and buying yachts and all that still doesn't really solve the problem when you consider the fact that people still have no frickin' money. And the more that companies automate everything, the less it's going to really be an issue. Jobs lost will be replaced. It is only logical for business to replace human labor. Yes, it is. Hey, everybody, Peter Joseph is listening. Really? Well, hi, Peter. How come you never return my emails? Well, great. Get in contact with me sometime. I would love to help you with content for Zeitgeist 3. And I talk to Roxanne and Jacques all the time, and she tells me that she's dropping a line to you. And I know you're really busy, so anyway, maybe you could ask me to co-host with you sometime on your blog talk show. I'll be more than happy to field some of these questions. Well, that's right, folks. I am honored tonight by the fact that one of my listeners is, in fact, Peter Joseph.